My name's Mark Bray. I'm a historian, currently a lecturer at Dartmouth College. I'm the author of Antifa, the Antifascist Handbook. Antifa is a revolutionary socialist politics of direct action targeting the far right. Anti-fascism can be traced back 100 years to the first socialists, communists, and anarchists who fought back against Mussolini in Italy, Hitler in Germany, those who traveled from around the world to fight in the Spanish Civil War. But what people don't realize is that after World War II, there was a far-right resurgence in Europe, largely in the form of a neo-Nazi skinhead wave that really triggered an anti-fascist resurgence in Britain and Germany, among punks, immigrants, leftists, fighting back against the street violence, and that grew into your modern Antifa movement, which spread to the United States in the 80s into the 90s in the form of anti-racist action, and that's the kind of lineage that you can trace the Antifa of today through. With the growth of the alt-right, with the Trump administration, there was, of course, a wave of hate crimes documented by the Southern Poverty Law Center, and an increasing need on the part of radical leftists, immigrants, queer and trans people for models of self-defense, models of organizing against the far right. And so Antifa is one of those outlets. And really historically, you can always see that the profile of anti-fascism is in direct response to that of fascism. So you don't want Antifa, stop having fascists. And that's really what you can see here today. And President Trump's comments that there are good people on both sides is really despicable dog whistling to the far right that is not grounded in any real understanding of the politics at play. So anti-fascism is a very contextual politics. It has everything to do with what the opposition to the far right looks in a given city or region. But I think that the basic fundamentals are not that dissimilar of arguing that fascism and white supremacy are not simply differences of opinion, but are political enemies to be organized against before they grow to the point where they threaten society. One of the more notable examples of Antifa success can be found in the example of the 43 group, composed of Jewish veterans of World War II who came home to London in the late 1940s to find that the fascists that they had fought over on the continent were still organizing at home a really virulent anti-Semitic campaign targeting the Jewish population of the East End of London. And these veterans formed this organization composed of commando units that essentially went around the city shutting down fascist street corner meetings. And over the course of a couple of years, they were largely successful, so that they voluntarily disbanded in 1949, considering their task of shutting down fascism at home and protecting the Jewish population of London to have succeeded. Because militant anti-fascists are reluctant to speak to journalists or the press because they fear backlash from law enforcement, they fear being targeted by the far right, there's relatively little written about the organizing experiences and history of anti-fascism in the post-war period, especially outside of Britain. And so, of course, when this political context emerged and there were all these counter-protests to the far right, there was a lack of information on Antifa. So hopefully one of the main outcomes of my book is explaining to people, regardless of their opinion, where this comes from, how anti-fascists see their struggle, and the goals they're trying to accomplish, so that people can make an informed and reasoned assessment, because unfortunately a lot of pundits and journalists really just imagine these politics in the abstract without seeing how they played out in practice. The notion of extremism that sort of says that anyone who's not in the center is equivalent, that ISIS and anarchists and socialists are all the same thing, is really ahistorical and missing the political nuance of anti-fascism or any politics. And really, anti-fascism grows out of the historical necessity of self-defense against some of the most heinous monsters in human history, goes back to the Spanish Civil War, resistance to the Nazis, and is reflected in the ongoing need, lamentably, for self-defense in the face of the far right. That was painfully evident in Charlottesville when hundreds of neo-Nazis went on a rampage and the police weren't around. So I think that kind of reluctant necessity is important in understanding what anti-fascism has been about and is about today. The current wave of Antifa has everything to do with the alt-right and with Trump's electoral victory. And so it's a politics that is a politics of self-defense and reaction. And we can see that the notion of a slippery slope, that if there are no more far-right, Antifa will start organizing against anyone they quote-unquote disagree with, misses the historical evidence to show that it is this kind of politics of response that will hopefully fade away as its necessity also fades away.